Welcome to SpanReads, not your typical rereads podcast, a 17th Shard series where we reread the Cosmere and are giant nerds about it. Today we are talking about Oathbringer and the use of magic in the story. I'm Ian, and joining me is David.
I am Windrunner.
Joshua.
I am Jofwu on the social media.
And Eric.
Hey, I'm Chaos.
And I'm Weirdwriter. This episode will have spoilers for Way of Kings, Words of Radiance, Edge Dancer, and Oathbringer. And I'm getting tired of saying all those books.
Yep. That'll be really fun. Wear SpanReads for Stormlight 7.
That's 20 years from now, probably,
Yeah,
unfortunately. Yeah. Magic stuff. What did we learn in this book?
God, what didn't we learn in this book? We learned so much in this book.
I suppose we did learn how the desolations functioned in this book.
Yeah,
that's important.
Classic Shardcast topic at this stage.
Yeah, no, for sure. When you were saying, Eric, our podcast really picked up around Oathbringer, I'm like, I don't even know if there would have been enough to sustain such a regular podcast before Oathbringer. We really just learned so much.
Jeez.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing you can start with is just the fused. I think that we really, up until this point, the Stormforms were our concept for what the Voidbringers were going to be. We were okay, we've got these other forms of power in the songs. We're going to see a lot of singers bonding with Voidspren, and that'll be the Voidbinders, or the Voidbringers, I should say.
And it was there's been some critique from Way of Kings of of the singers being a quote unquote evil race. And this book just sinks in that no, singers are just normal people. The ancient singers who sold their souls to the devil, basically, those people are evil, and they're body snatching their descendants. That's bad. Yeah. So it's there's an element of singers also being victims of this whole process, that side, as well as the mistreatment from the human side of them being lobotomized for thousands of years.
Yeah, I think that was things I've heard of Words of Radiance, where people are oh yeah, of course the singers are just the bad guys. So that's a really good point. It's so much more complicated than we expected, and this book really just opens up so much more complexity with everything, which makes sense. There's 10 books, so it kind of checks out here.
Yeah, but it does dovetail nicely with what we saw of the singers before this book, where the Parshendi are very much portrayed as morally superior to the Alethi, and so it was disappointing to kind of imagine them just being completely subsumed by some sort of evil force. But that kind of complexity gets to remain, even if most of the listeners do not get to remain.
Nope. Shout out to the line where even before the fused could command the surges, humans could not fight them. Nice. What?
Yeah.
Just Oathbringer chapter 38, where it's we finally get to learn what is going on with the Oath Pact and the Heralds and the Voidbringers and stuff. It's good. I like it a lot.
It was also interesting coming back to this and seeing such these early depictions of the fused of we know more about them from Rhythm of War, obviously, in terms of terminology for a lot of things of no, it's that one can fly. It's okay, so Windrunners are soul in sole command of the skies. That's bad.
Yeah, you can tell he was definitely afraid to overwhelm people with powers. He was we're just mostly gonna do the bad Windrunners in this book, everybody.
Yeah. Well, and with the Regals and stuff, there's so many things, and so it is really easy to overwhelm people, especially when it's we don't have Dustbringers until this book. So it's oh, okay, right. knowledge level very low here. We got to be careful here. So
We don't. It's not even just Dustbringers. Like a lot of people, I think with this book were really frustrated, even like with how much like magic stuff came.
yes.
Because previous books, the magic was turned way down, right? In
Mhm.
prologue, you have Zeth be like, here's the, the basic lashing, and what he lays out, like, these are the powers of the Windrunners. And that's basically like the magic you get until there's a couple of weird things. You get Soulcasting,
And some
Shalana
light weaving.
eventually learns light weaving. And so you add that in, but it's still like pretty downplayed. And then Words of Radiance ends and it's like, oh, we've got more nice radiant now. And this book just like opens it up with all kinds of, there's different radiants. You have Dalinar doing weird connection-y stuff, weird connection stuff. Like I remember the previews for this book coming out, and like when Dalinar does like the map thing with Shallan, where they like use their powers together, everyone's just like going bonkers. Like, what does this mean?
Nope.
You've got all these fuse popping up. There's just like, there's so much, and a lot of people I think were frustrated by that, and I also saw a lot of people who were concerned about like the power creep of the characters, right? There's a big, by the end of this book, the previous book, you go from like mundane fighting with swords and spears on the Shattered Plains to fighting gods with magic. Shallan making armies of light weaving figures to go. It's a big shift in like how involved the magic is in the story.
That's true.
And it's awesome, and I love that.
Yeah.
That's what I'm
I
here
do love
for.
So it would have been really easy to overwhelm people even more so than maybe it was for some.
For sure. I liked all the squire content. Like this book is like where squires get to kind of become a thing that we understand on any level, aside from Lopen regrowing his arm. Like that was kind of a button at the end of Words of Radiance, but it's fun to see, like to like see that part of the Radiance kind of come into focus and see like Gaz accidentally creating a light weaving out of nowhere and stuff like that.
And how it like leads to Teft being a full radiant and things like that. That's just cool.
Yeah, because it feeds into when Brandon was like conceptualizing a lot of this. It's like, what are the pieces that make a knight? And it's like sword and armor are like the main things. Like horses with the Rhyshadium. Like it gets mentioned in this book of like them sometimes being referred to as the third shard, feeding into radiancy. It's like squires, also a thing that happened with knights.
Yeah. And going with like the overall magic level, Brandon always said that what Stormlight was about is, instead of the magic going away, this is the magic returning, right? Like that was one of his core things. So it was never surprising to me that we would get so more, because he's like, well, is there 30 magic systems? It depends how you count. So it's like, okay, I know there's a lot going on that we're really just like getting the teases of. And I can see why people are like, oh, this is like a lot really quick. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, the Everstorm's there. Like the Desolation's here, man. What do you want?
People of Rashar are learning that they live in a fantasy world too. They're like, oh, really?
It's like Caitlin does have like the line of like, the world didn't change. It was always like this. We just didn't know it, which is a great line.
Yeah.
But also we do see like in Way of Kings and Words of Radiance that like, notably with Lift, of there being other Radiants out there. And this is the book where a lot of that is coming together in a really big way.
Yeah. I don't know. I always seem to vibe usually with where Brandon's going with things. So I'm like, yeah, this makes sense. This is where I always expected the series to go. Didn't expect Odium to be here so soon, but yeah.
And even with like bringing in more stuff, it's like we see one example of division, which is like burning the planet. Not the planet. That's not what happened.
I mean, eventually, maybe.
Yeah.
And then like we see a little bit of it with Amaram and Yelignar, like doing weird stuff with all the surges. Like there's a little bit of division in there with like setting the air on fire. So it's like they're being introduced, but they're not being explored in depth.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we get like an edge dancer refused. Like he is kind of keeping it to the thing so that we mostly see with just like little hints at the powers he hasn't explored yet.
Mm-hmm. Which is good. Like, have the thrill be involved, because like, okay, yeah, this is the thrill book. We know these things, so.
Because the only like new powers like that really get explored are Bondsmith nonsense. With like the whole spiritual adhesion thing, and then all of the stuff where I think Brandon thought Bondsmiths had cohesion when they definitely don't. And Dalinar does a lot of stuff with stone that doesn't make sense.
Hey, it's a unique Bondsmith power, making use of both his surges and unique Bondsmith abilities that lets him heal statues.
Like, what is that thing where Dalinar's inhibition sees the Stone Ward? The Stone Ward does a thing, and then there's this weird line that was a continuity error in the original, where the Stormfather says, "Ah, yes, what that Storm Ward did. Yeah, you don't have that surge." It's like it makes no sense that that's a line in context. It's just like, it's so clearly like a continuity fix. It's like, okay, interesting.
That's the surge you don't have.
It's like, oh, okay.
But like, there's also like a thing in the later vision that he brings Venli into, where he like slides down a wall, and I'm like, that's definitely not tension you're doing there. That's definitely weird cohesion stuff.
Oh, see, I always thought that was shard plate starting to form, and he was like had like an arm kind of cropping into place right there that he was gripping with.
I just thought they're in a vision, so who the heck? Like, I don't know. Whatever.
It's just the description reminded me of later when Yasna pops up and she's got the geometric lines around her for a second, and she's using her plate. So I mean, you know, in the context
That's
of this, we don't see Dalinar use any plate, so who can say?
So, the statue stuff with the cohesion. It's just like, oh, interesting. Oh.
He's uniting them, Eric. We don't understand the most sacred duty of the previous Bondsmiths was mostly dealing with broken statues and other damaged pieces of art.
Like, healing the statue was not as much of a problem as that weird Stormfather line. Where I'm like, oh, it's the surge you don't have. Okay, all right, cool,
so
good
funny.
Talk. I mean, it's just as helpful as what the Stormfather usually says. So I mean, I guess it's fine. But
it's like, I do have the surge I do have, Stormfather, please.
But like getting into like the spiritual adhesion stuff, that's very cool. Like,
super cool. Yeah.
Basically manipulating connection, learning languages. That's all really neat.
Yeah. And I love the Stormfather giving Dalinar a hard time. It's like, yeah, you healed a statue. It's like, yeah, cool. Like, you can do like so much more than this, but okay. Good job, buddy.
Oh yeah, no, that's fun. And I mean, the summoning of the perpendicularity is a great way to like show how like the potential of the Bondsmith while also doing something that's very like, you know, we're like, oh, we know what that is. Like,
yeah, true.
Quick break. That reminds me of something.
Okay.
He's gonna come back with the mini of Dalinar.
I love the reviews of Oathbringer. That's like, oh, they're fighting another dark god again. It's like, have you not been paying attention? Like, Odium's coming. Odium reigns. Like, what are you talking about? Like, yeah.
Also, screw you, David.
What? Oh. There we go.
Of bending the realms to your will. I've definitely thought about grabbing this every day this week and while recording every one of these episodes, and I did not do that. So now I did it.
Nice.
There he is.
Hell yeah. I mean, it is badass and insane.
I suppose I should have also grabbed the Yasna one. That's literally the cover of Oathbringer.
It's okay. She's in the overlay. I moved it so you can actually see her face, and our pictures aren't over it. But yeah, like the Bondsmith stuff is crazy and barely explored here, but is very cool just to see like the use of like language and stuff.
Braden has a reputation for hard magic, and he mostly very much deserves that. But I love that he like doesn't commit fully to this, like to the fullness of that. Like he leaves himself some weird things where he can play with the Night Watcher, with cultivation, just doing weird stuff with his memories and making it come back. You know, he can do stuff like the Bondsmith, where it's sort of balancing this line between, you know, playing with connection. What does that mean? There's some rules to what that means, but also he could do pretty much anything, and we would be like, oh yes, he played with a connection to do this, you know, this thing. So I like that. I like that he leaves himself that room to kind of do some sort of stuff that just surprises me that I would never have guessed is going to happen.
It's usually like a pretty well-defined space too. Like, you know, Kaladin's not going to suddenly do something that we don't understand at all. But like, you know, if you're getting into the Night Watcher, you're getting into the Bondsmiths, that you might have, like you're kind of prepared for something unexpected to happen, as opposed to a more specific order.
Ultimately, Brandon is a lot softer than people think. It's like he has hard edges and soft edges. And people tend to focus on the one side where that, like, there's a spectrum of stuff in his books. In one side is very regimented, and then it filters into very soft stuff. And they often like do intertwine quite nicely.
Yeah, because I think he's always like trying to explore like spirituality a bit, like with you know, connection and stuff, but also like the weird Nohadon vision. Okay, what's going on here? Where Brandon's leaving room for, like, the characters don't even really know what this is, and he's not. I don't think he's ever going to really explain what that ever is. Really, it's just like, yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird. Like, maybe a divine thing, maybe not. I don't know. And leaving him that room to have legitimate spiritual experiences in a fantasy world where magic is easily demonstrable, right? And so it's interesting.
Yeah, it's good that he doesn't come out and be like, and that is a construct from the spiritual realm, guys. Like,
yeah,
confirmed. Dalinar is wrong.
Yep. One other, I think, crazy thing that really expands things is Unmade. Like, lots of Unmade, because the Midnight Mother is super cool because we have seen Midnight Essence, right? Earlier. And so it's very cool to see where that comes from, question mark. But like the Midnight Mother and stuff, because before it's just like death rattles. It's like, okay, there's some names. Cool. Just very cool to see the Unmade, see... God, I love how the structure of the Unmade helps Dalinar get the thrill together. It's great. But we're really like expanding the world, seeing Xianat, like, even though like that's mentioned in Words of Radiance in that vision, right? With Xianat like corrupting some things. I think that was in the Pure Lake vision, I think.
Yeah. It's a little bit.
There's something about a spy, like
so it's cool to see that. And then like we just get like the weird, crazy magic stuff, like with Ashert Marn. That's just like really unnerving and weird and very unpleasant, honestly.
Oh yeah,
like,
the crawling circle around the Oath Gate.
Don't like that. Don't know what's going on. I'll be honest, I have no idea what's going on with the Queen's Guard. Like, all the stuff with Aesidon, I don't understand mechanically what's happening at all. Like, if they're under Ashert Marn's control, I don't know.
I think it like, ultimately that's kind of what I've decided is, I think, okay, we've got the Unmade, and that's like a big chunk of investiture, and that's maybe messing with the time a little bit. So that's why they're so weird about like, how long have we been here? Like, that's confusing them.
Sure.
And I think that like something strange is happening. Like, probably something not the same as what we saw with the Sadius army in the end, but something like that, where they've got some sort of limited bond to this Spren that is causing them to act in that way.
Sure.
You know?
Okay. It just makes me wonder, like, timeline wise with Aesidon, because she was kind of going bonkers before the Everstorm in Words of Radiance, right? That's why the Ardent did the thing, right?
Yeah. I think she was always...
Ashert Marn there?
I mean, I don't think she was going crazy. I think she was just a bad person.
I think she was a bad person, and that Ashert Marn was already there, and it was kind of influencing them. And then the Everstorm starts,
And it like
Asher
really
Martin
activated.
becomes active, and then it kind of snowballs.
Because
Like, that's how I've envisioned it.
There was like a gluttony aspect of like lots of feasts and like and stuff. So like that's why I don't know.
Yeah, and there's a mention of, I think, because we get the Hessi's Mythica epigraphs in this, of Asher Martin potentially being responsible for like the fall of another court, like historically. So I feel like it probably kind of shows up places and sometimes becomes more active and leads to like some like a kind of gluttonous collapse of a ruling class, and then it kind of moves on.
You know, that it's almost like a spren that's like attracted to like rich people who have a lot of money and power, because it's like, oh yeah, they have the ability to be able to do this. Oh, I like that.
Yeah,
that's kind of funny.
Does Asher Martin, does it create excess, or is it just drawn to it, just like the Windspren?
I mean, probably a little bit of both.
Yeah, I just don't want to undersell, like, if Asher Martin was involved, that like Aesidon didn't just happen because Asher Martin was there. Aesidon was bad.
Yeah, and then yeah, absolutely. I do wish we could have gotten more Aesidon. I'll be honest. Like it's like, yeah, there's Unmade stuff. She's evil. I'm like, okay.
I've never felt like she quite lived up to like Yasta thinking about assassinating her. I was like, that was a pretty serious like threat to put on the table, and like she seems bad, but I don't know about this.
Yeah. It's like, what did she discover? I was like, I want to know. Like, was she just crazy? Yeah. I don't know.
She's got some compelling lines where she's like, seems to know. She's like, oh, your father, Gavilar, he found the ancient spren, but he never figured out how to bond to them. But I did, you know.
Yeah,
she's got some weird stuff to her that
I want to know what's going on with that. Sorry, Unmade. Quick shout out for the Yurthir Gem Archive in Mythica for giving us Ba Adamishram for the first time. I saw you right from the beginning.
The High Princess of the Voidbringers.
Yeah, hell yeah. So I like that. It is just so funny though in the Mythica things where like Hessi's like, oh, Ba Adamishram destroyed in Aritium. And then the next one's like, Rishafir also destroyed. And then it's like, well, we know that's not true. It's like even if you're not really paying attention and don't understand the gem archives, you at least know it's like, wait a minute. so this is not completely accurate. So Ba Adamishram's not like dead for sure. Oh yeah, and then Yelignar.
Oh, Yelignar.
Yelignar is also there. I was like, there's another Unmade here. It's like 5 Unmade here.
Yeah, there are 5 Unmade in this book. Like, we definitely go 0 to 70 with them.
Shout out to Chamorish, who's not the Night Watcher.
She's the Dust Mother. The 2 facts we know.
Yeah, and I wasn't sure with like Yelignar, like what did Aesidon bog Yelignar? Was it like the Queen's Guard some Yelignar stuff and not just Asher Martin? It's really hard to say.
For sure,
more Asher Martin to me.
It seems more Asher Martin.
They're weird. Feels very like the way that all the people in the Revel are like just don't have a good sense of time and are just sort of, I don't know,
in the thrall of it.
The way it mentally affects people feels similar.
Yeah. I love the Unmade. It's really weird and creepy and very odium-y, and I really enjoyed seeing those.
It was very satisfying to see them foreshadowed in the previous books. Like they were in the death rattles, and they were like, it would occasionally get mentioned, and then to see them kind of appear in this book. Like if you were paying attention, there was always stuff there about them. And so it was exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Shalon has the line somewhere of like, they would be normal to us, which is a little bit of foreshadowing, even though I think we kind of already know that this from the diagram epigraphs and Words of Radiance of Nergal being the source of the thrill.
Yeah.
Where like the Alethi, like the thrill is just a thing that happens. We don't know what's going on there. We're not going to think about it. It's like, nope, literally Spren of the Unmade, Spren of Odium is doing that.
Yeah. That's one of those like Way of Kings things where it's just like, ooh, thrill, capital T. Like, what is this? What does that mean? And then we got
I remember like the theories like before Words of Radiance of like the different like ethnicities having like their own innate power. And like, the
Nice,
Eleni had the
interesting.
thrill, and like
Okay.
the Vadens had memories.
Oh,
That was the
okay,
thing
interesting.
Shallan had.
Yeah.
And that's not a thing, obviously.
Yeah. No, not at all.
When you know like 2% of the lore of a series, you extrapolate in interesting directions.
Yes. And then like there's all the Shadesmar stuff, like Celebrant, and just like seeing society there, which is I think that's a promise from like Way of Kings and Words of Radiance of like seeing into Shadesmar a little bit. It's like the cognitive realm, what does that mean? And then we finally see it, and it is really haunting and cool, and also very fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
And
like
there's like mention of Sprung cities like, in Words of Radiance, at least.
Yeah. So it's like, we gotta see that. Shout out to the 2000 Brome silver chain or something like that. But it's just cool seeing the Spren be, like actual characters and actual beings, and not just like in subservience to a person, right? Like, they have their whole societies, and it's very interesting. And
I loved when Adolin, like when they cross over through the Oathgate, and Adolin's like looking around, and he's like describing the way that they look to him. Like there's these like creatures there. They're humans, but they're like not, because they're really weird. And he's just describing them as these like alien things. And it's just fun to like see what they look like on that side.
I remember being very confused when I first read Oathbringer, and then it's like, oh, okay, they're in Shadesmar. Okay. Like it took me a bit.
That does remind me of like when they do like transfer to Shadesmar, of like the claws coming up from the depths around, and I'm like, I definitely imagined it different in previous reads than this one, because now I'm like imagining like a hand coming up, whereas like before, like it was definitely like arms coming up. And like this is so much scarier, of just like long claws coming up from the depths.
And we didn't learn who that was, right? We were just like, it's probably an unmade of some sort, like, or
it
what
felt
that
like
was.
Ashertmarn to me.
I kind of feel like it's probably not Sianat,
No.
and probably not Yelignar. So Ashertmarn feels likely.
Because like Yelignar's in Aesidon. Right there.
Skynon said that they were like tasked with killing them. Like Odium, they were supposed to. She was supposed to kill them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was it explicitly like not made of beads? Because part of me was like wondering, like, is it like manifest, like taking the beads, like the way that Shallan is able to learn how to control them, and
I didn't think
making something from those, or
I don't think it's made of beads.
I think it's just how it looks in the cognitive realm, which like all Spren, I imagine, just look crazy. And even if Ashertmarn is not very intelligent, very, very strong effect. Like all things considered, it's like that's it was haunting, being like, oh, the inner rings and like just all the foods like decayed. It's like, oh, I don't like this at all. Oh.
Yeah, like Ashertmarn is an interesting one, because like I don't really see a way Brandon could use it again. Like this is kind of a one-trick pony in a sense, of like, okay, like it was really effective here, but there's not a reusability factor like Yelignar or Sianat.
Sure.
It seems to me more like kind of like a city pacifier. Like you're like, oh, this city's getting kind of uppity. Let's send in Ashertmarn, kind of like tamp down some of the chaos there, and drive the people down a little bit. But it's definitely not a frontline unmade, it feels like.
No, not at all.
Send the heart into the battlefield.
Yeah.
What they need to do is send Sabariel in with a perfect gem, because I feel like of anybody on Team Radiant, he's the one who would understand Ashertmarn the best.
That is so
Very
funny.
Good. That's actually really funny.
And he's just going into like, why is this me? Why did I sign up? I did not sign up for this.
I guess I'll have to save the world again. All right, fine.
We do get the invaluable Soulcaster lore about various modes of Soulcasters. Actually, though, for real though, the whole like Soulcasting like sickness thing really comes to the forefront in this book, and I think is
Super
another
cool.
really cool horror thing
Super
that
cool.
Brandon does.
Mhm.
Because you see it with Ithi and her sister, right, with their vines
Mhm.
going.
Kaza.
You have that. You have Kaza. You
Great
have
interlude, by the way.
the Gavilars, like when they make the statue out of Gavilar, right? The ardent there. Dallin notes that he's turning into granite or whatever.
Yeah, because they're very secretive about who's actually using the Soulcasters in the previous books, right? And like it's shrouded in secrecy, and so it's really interesting to see, right?
There's, I think, a hint of that it does this in Words of Radiance, but it was very subtle, and it was not really clear what's going on from what I recall. And here it's like, oh, Kaza's face is falling off and turning into smoke.
Yikes! Yeah.
Talking about body horror from a previous episode, it's like, yeah, that's that.
Yeah, and like certain Soulcasters can do certain things, and like one of the Azir ones, it could do two things, and Bronze was one of them. Which is like, okay, interesting.
It was like bronze and oil.
I think so. I don't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, they're like, we really wanted a food Soulcaster, and we got the bronze one. Great. Yeah, the other thing I liked with the Soulcasting transformation was I think we got to see with Kaza just how she was kind of like losing her humanity too a little bit. Like she was having trouble interacting with the crew and kind of understanding what they wanted from her. Like, she was like, oh, does this guy think I'm cute? And she's like smiling at him with her like her hole in her face. And you're like, oh boy.
I guess it's things like that where it's like, oh, the scale of magic is like crazy. But at least like with Soulcasters, like that's very clearly like been there the whole time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I don't think there's anything like supernaturally going on with like Kaza's mental state with regards to like her inability to interact with people. I think she's not had a lot of normal interactions with people,
socializing.
I'm sure that's part of it. I definitely got the implication that like it has not helped her to be slowly turning into smoke.
Well,
like,
I mean,
maybe that's just me.
That's not necessarily the best when you go to parties, cool party trick though, I guess.
Also, shout out to the Kaza interlude and more sleepless stuff going on with Akana.
Yep.
Who knows what's going on there?
Yep.
I think it's interesting that Soulcasters have different modes. I still understand why that would be and why there's so much variety in what Soulcasters can do, but
because it's touched on in Way of Kings too, of like some can do all 10 essences, some can do like 3, some can do only 1. It's like, why?
Yeah. Sure would be great to get some POVs learning Soulcasting properly, and it's like, it's so funny that Yasna is talking with Shalana. It's like, well, let's do a quick Soulcasting thing at like the end of the battle. It's like, why are we doing this now? Like, I mean, okay, I'll take it, but...
Well, thank you for watching. You can find us at 17shard.com for all the news, discussion, theories, and fun that you could ever want. You can find us on social media, SoundCloud. You can leave us a review on iTunes. You can subscribe on YouTube. And you can even support us on Patreon. See you next time. Bye.
Peace.
Bye.
Peace.